Chapter 2. The District 12 girl? How could there be a bigger slap in the face? District 12, the smallest district, the joke district, with its stunted, joint swollen kids that always die in the first 5 minutes. And not only that, but the girl? Not that a girl couldn't win the games, but in his mind the Hunger Games were largely about brute force, and the girls were naturally smaller than the boys and therefore at a disadvantage. Cornelia to put my hair up. It was getting a bit too hot. It's kind of raining outside, and up where I am it gets humid when it rains. Okay, back to the story. Cornelius had never been a particular favourite of Dean Highbottom, whom jokingly called High as Kite Bottom among his friends, but had not expected such a public humiliation. Had the nickname gotten back to him, or was this just an acknowledgement that in the New World Order, the Snows were fading into existence? He could feel the blood burning in his cheeks as he tried to regain composure. Oh god, I just dropped the bookmark. Grab it. Got it. Yeah, I've got Pokemon cards. I use Pokemon cards as a bookmark. Where was I? Most of the other students had risen and were chatting amongst themselves. He must join them, pretend that this was no consequence. He had seemed incapable of movement. The most he could manage was to turn his head to the right, where Sejanus still sat beside him. Coriolanus opened his mouth, but stopped when the barely concealed misery on the other boy's face. "What is it?" he said. "Aren't you happy?" "District 2, the boy. That's the pick of the litter." "You forgot I'm part of that litter," Sejanus said hoarsely. If you didn't tune into the first chapter, Sejanus was moved from District 2 after helping the capital with what they call the Dark Days, where the rebels, or the districts, wanted to overthrow the capital. So I'm a bit tired today. Let me know if I should do a Pokemon show on my YouTube channel. Coriolanus let that sink in. So 10 years in the capital and the privileged life it provided had been wasted on Sejanus. He still thought of himself as a district citizen. Sentimental nonsense. Sejanus' forehead creased in consternation. "I'm sure my father requested it. He's always trying to get my mind right." "No doubt," thought Coriolanus. "Old Strabo Plith, deep pockets, an influencer. Stupid tears from yawning. An influence where respected of his lineages was not. And while the mentorship was supposedly based on merit, strings clearly have been pulled. The audience had settled into their seats now at the back of the dais. Curtains parted to reveal the floor-to-ceiling screen. The reaping appeared live from each district, moving to the east coast to the west, and was broadcasted across the country. That means District 12 would kick off for the day. Everyone rose as the Seal of Panam filled the screen, accompanied by the capital anthem. Gem of Panam, mighty city, through the ages you shine anew. Some of the students fumbled for the words, but Coriolanus, who heard his mother butcher it daily for years, sung all three verses in a forceful voice. Garnering a few nods of approval. It was pathetic, but he needed every drop of approval he could get. The seal dissolved to show President Ravenstill, her hair streaking with silver, dressed in his pre-war military uniform, as a reminder that he'd been controlling the districts long before the dark days of the rebellion. He recited a brief passage from the Treaty of Treason, which laid out the Hunger Games as a war reparation. Young distance lives taken from the capital lives. Where was I? Young capital lives that have been lost. The price of the rebels' treachery. The game makers cut to a bleak square of District 12, where a temporary stage now lined with peacekeepers. Just checking something. Had been erected before the Justice Building. Mayor Lip, a squat, freckled man in a hopelessly outdated suit, stood between two burlap sacks. He dug his hand deeply into the bag on his left, pulled out a slip of paper, barely glanced at it. The District 12 girl tribute is Lacey Gray Bard, he said into the mic. The camera swept over the crowded grey, hungry faces in grey, shapeless clothing, seeking the tribute. It zoomed in towards a disturbance, a girl drawing back from the unfortunate chosen one. The audience gave a surprised murmur of the sight of her. Lucy Gray Bard stood up from Lucy Gray Bard stood upright in a dress made of a rainbow of ruffles, now raggedy but once fancy. Her dark curly hair was pulled up and woven with limp wild flowers. Her colourful ensemble drew the eye, as the once tattered butterfly in a field of moths. She did not make straight for the stage, but began weaving through the girls off to her right. It happened quickly, the dip of her hand into the ruffles of her hips, the bright green transported from her pocket to the deposited down the collar of a smoking redhead's blouse. The rustle of her skirt as she moved on. Focus stayed on the victim, her smirk changing to an expression of horror. Her shrieks as she fell to the ground, pouring at her clothes. The shouts of the mayor, and in the background, her assailant was still weaving, still gliding her way to the stage, not looking back even once. Heavensby Hall came to life with people elbowed their neighbours. Did you see that? What did she drop down her dress? A lizard? I saw a snake. Did she kill her? Coriolanus scared the crowd and felt a spark of hope. His long-shot tribute, his throwaway, his insult had captured the capital's attention. That was a good idea, right? With his help, perhaps she could keep it. But he could turn disgrace into a remarkable showing. One way or another, their fates were irrevocably linked. Up on the screen, Mayor Lip flew down the steps of the stage, pushing his way through the assembled girls to reach the fallen one on the ground. Mayfair, Mayfair, he cried. My daughter needs help. A circle had opened up around her, but few hearts attempt to help her. Were blocked by thrashing limbs. The mayor broke into the clearing as a small iridescent green snake shot out from the folds of her dress into the crowd, bringing screams and scrambles to avoid it. The departure of the snake calmed Mayfair, but her distress was immediately replaced by embarrassment. She looked straight into the camera as she realized all the citizens of Penang were watching. One hand tried to straighten the bow that had gone askew in her hair. The other moved to right a garment, filthy with coal dust that coated everything and was torn from her clothes. As her father helped her to her feet, it was apparent that she had wet herself. He removed his jacket to wrap around her and handed her over to peacekeepers to lead her away. She turned back to the stage, trying a murderous look on the District 12's newest tribute. As Coriolanus watched Lucy Gray Bard take the stage, he felt a stab of uneasiness. Could she be mentally unstable? There was something vaguely familiar but disturbing about her. The rows of raspberry pink, royal blue, and daffodil yellow ruffles. She's like a circus performer, one of the girls remarked. The other mentors made a sound of agreement. That was it. Cornelius reached back into his memory to the circuses. In his early high childhood, jugglers and acrobats, clowns, and dancing girls in puffy dresses twirling around, while his brain grew giddy at with the spun sugar. His tributes choosing such festival attire for the darkest event of the year shown a strangeness beyond a simple lapse of judgment. The allotted time for District 12 reaping has no doubt come and gone, but they still lacked a male tribute. Even so, when Mayor Lip retook the stage, he ignored the bag's names, made a beeline for the girl tribute, struck her in the face so powerful that it knocked her to her knees. He had raised his hand to hit her again when a couple of peacekeepers intervened, grabbed his arms, attempting to redirect him to the business at hand. When he resisted, they hauled him back into the Justice Building, bringing the whole proceeding to a standstill. Attention shifted to the girl on stage. As the camera zoomed in on her, Coriolanus was not reassured about Lucy Gray Bard's sanity. When she got in the makeup, she had no idea, for it had become accessible again in the capital. But her eyes were shadow blue, lined with black, her cheeks rogued, and her lips stained with somewhat greasy red. Here in the capital, it would have been bold. In District 12, it felt immoderate. Oh, getting a headache again. I'll be back, guys. I'm back. I had a headache. I had to have a little lie down, so my hair's a bit ruffled. She was impossible to look away from as she sat there running her hand over her skirt, compulsively smoothing the ruffles. Only when they were neatly arranged did she raise her hand to touch the mark on her cheek. Her lower lip trembled slightly and her eyes shone with tears. that threatened to spill over. Don't cry, Cornelius whispered. He caught himself and looked around nervously to find other students were riveted, their faces showing concern. They won her sympathy, despite her oddness. They had no idea who she was or why she attacked Mayfair, but who couldn't see that smirking thing was spiteful and her father was a brute who would flatten a girl he'd just sentenced to death. I bet they rigged it, Sir Janus said quietly. Her name wasn't on that slip. Just as the girl was about to lose her battle with the tears, a strange thing happened. From out of nowhere, a voice began to sing, a young voice, which might belong to either a boy or a girl. But such a pitch carried across the silent square. You can take... Sorry, voice crack. You can take my past, you can take my history. A puff of wind blew across the stage. The girl slowly lifted her head. Somewhere else in the crowd, a deeper, distinctly male voice sung out. You can take my pie, but his name's a mystery. The shadow of a smile played on Lucy Greybird's lips. She suddenly pushed herself to her feet, strode to the center of the stage, gripping the mic, and let loose. Nothing you can take from me was ever worth keeping. A free hand dug into the ruffles of her skirt, swishing it side to side, and it began to make sense. The costume, the makeup, the hair. Whoever she was dressed for a performance all along. She had a fine voice, bright and clear of high notes, husky and rich on the low. She moved with assurance. You can take my charm, you can You can take my charm, you can take my humor, you can take my wealth, 'cause it's just a rumor. Nothing you can take from me was ever worth keeping. Singing transformer, and Coriolanus found her disconcerting. This was something excited, even attractive about her. The cameras drank her in as she crossed the front of the stage and leaned out over the audience, straight and insolent. Thinking you're so fine, thinking you have mine, thinking you're in control, thinking you'll change me, maybe rearrange me, thinking that's your goal, 'cause... Then she was off, sashaying around the stage, right past the peak keepers, some who were having trouble suppressing styles. None of them moved to stop her. You can take my sass, you can take my talking, you can kiss my ass, and then keep on walking. Nothing you can take from me was ever worth keeping. The door to the Justice building banged open, and the peacekeepers who had taken the mayor burst back on to the stage. The girl facing front, but you can see her register their arrival. They headed far into the stage for a big finish. No, sir, nothing you can take from me is worth dirt. Nothing, take it 'cause I give it for free. It won't hurt. Ow. Nothing you can take from me was ever worth keeping. She managed to blow a kiss before they were on her. My friends call me Lucy Gray. Hope you will too, she called out. One of the peacekeepers wrestled the mic from her hand as another picked her up, carried her back to the middle of the stage. She waved a raucous, applause. Not dead silent. For a moment there was silence in Heavensby Hall as well. Coriolanus wondered, just like him, they were hoping she would keep singing. Everyone broke out talking. Oh, bloody red nose. First about the girl, then about who's been lucky enough to get her. The other students would crane their heads around, some giving thumbs up, some shooting resentful looks. He gave a bemused shake of his but inside he was glowing. Snow lands on top. Peacekeepers brought the mayor back out, planted themselves on either side of him to avoid further conflict. Lucy Gray ignored his return. Having seemingly regained her poise by performing, the mayor glowered at the camera as he slapped his hand into the second basket, pulled out several slips out. A few floated down the stage. He read the remaining paper. District 12 Boy tribute is Just Up Diggs. The kids in the square stirred and made way for Jessup, a boy with fringe hair plastered down on his prominent forehead. As District 12 tributes went, he was a fine specimen, bigger than average and strong-looking. His grimness suggested he was already employed in the mines, and a half-hearted attempt at washing had revealed a clean, If you didn't, I let everyone know if you didn't, tune into chapter 1. I've got a bit of a speech problem, okay? I've got a stutter, and I've also got a slight lisp. Relatively clean oval in the middle of his face, but it was ringed with black, and the coal dust caked his nails. Awkwardly, he ascended the stairs. As he neared the mayor, Lucy Gray stepped forward, extended her hand. The boy hesitated and reached out and shook. Lucy Gray crossed in front of him, switching her right hand for her left. Then they were standing side by side, holding hands. When she made a deep curtsy, pulling the boy into a bow, she smattered a smattering of applause, and a long whoop came from District 12 crowd before the peacekeepers closed in, and the reaping broadcast cut to District 8. Coriolanus acted in gross in the show as 8, 6, and 11 called their tributes, but in his brain spun the repercussion of landing Lucy Gray Bard. She was a gift, he knew it. He must treat her as such, but how best to exploit her show-stopping entrance? How to wrangle some success from a dress, a snake, and a song? The tributes would be given precious little time with the audience before the games began. How could he get the audience to invest in her, and by extension him, in just an interview? Its half resonated the other tributes, mostly pitiful creatures. He took note of the stronger ones. Sejanus got a towering fellow from District 2, and Livia's District 1 boy looked at... Oh, God. I get cramps. That was my hip. Livia's District 1 boy looked as if he could be a contender as well. Cornelius' girl seemed fairly healthy, but the slight build was more suited for dancing than hand-in-hand combat. She could run fast enough, though, and that was important. As the reaping drew close to a close, the smell of food from the buffet wafted over the audience. Fresh bread, onions, meat. Coriolanus could not keep his stomach from growling and risked a couple swallows of Posca to quiet it. He winced He felt wide, light-headed, and ravenous. After the screen went dark, he had to use all the discipline he could not to rush over to the buffet. The endless dance of hunger had defined his life, not the very early years before the war, but every day since had been a battle of negotiation, a game. How was it best to stave off hunger, eat all the food at one meal, spread it through a day in dribs and drabs, wolf it down or chew every morsel into liquid? It was all a mind game to distract himself from the fact it was never. No one would let him have enough. During the war, the rebels had held food-producing districts. Taking a page out of the capital's playbook, they tried to starve the capital into submission using food, or a lack of therefore, as a weapon. Now the tables have turned. Tables had turned, with the capital controlling the supply and taking it one step further, twisting the knife into the district's heart with the Hunger Games. Amid the violence of the games, there was silent agony that everyone in Nam has experienced. Their desperation for enough sustenance to bring you the following sunrise. That desperation had turned upstanding capital citizens into monsters. People who dropped dead from the starvation in the streets became part of the gruesome food chain. One winter's night, Coriolanus and Tigris had slipped out of the apartment to scavenge some wooden crates when they spotted early in the alley on the way. They passed three bodies, recognizing it as one of the young maid who served tea so nicely at the Crane's afternoon gathering. A heavy, wet snow began falling as they thought the streets deserted. But on the way home, a bundle of figures sent them scurrying behind a ledge and watched as their neighbour, Nero Price, a titan in the railroad industry, carved the leg off the maid, sawing back and forth through a terrifying knife until the limb came free. He wrapped it in the skirt he ripped from her waist and bolted down the street and that led back to his town house. The cousins never spoke of it, even to each other, but it was burnt into Coriolanus' memory. A scavenger distorted Price's face. The white anklet, the scuffed back shoe at the end of the severed limb, the absolute horror of realizing that he too could have been viewed as edible. Coriolanus credited both his literal and moral survival to the grandmam's foresight early in the year. His parents were dead, Tigris orphaned as well, and both children were living with their grandmother. The rebels had been making slow but steady progress to the capital, although arrogance kept that reality from being widely acknowledged in the city. Where was I? Oh yeah, food shortages required even the richest to seek out supplies on the black market, and that was how Coriolanus found himself on the black market. Once trendy nightclub of a once trendy. Oh, flip. Sorry, I read the line wrong. Let's retry that. And that was how Coriolanus found himself at the back door of a once trendy nightclub one late October afternoon. Holding the handle of a small red wagon in one hand and Grandmam's gloved hand in the other. There was a bit of chill in the air. Oh, dropped my bookmark again. Got it. There was a bit of chill in the air. That warned of obvious ominously of winter, and a blanket of gloomy grey clouds overhead. They came to see Pluribus Bell, an aging man with lemon-tinted spectacles. Where was I? And white powdered wig that fell to his waist. He and his partner Cyrus, a musician, owned the shattered club, now made to do trafficking goods from its back alley. The Snows had come for a case of canned milk. The fresh stuff had disappeared weeks ago, but Pluribus said he has sold out, but had just arrived in crates of dried lima beans stacked high on a mirrored stage behind him. They'll keep for years, Pluribus promised the Grandmam. I plan on setting aside 20 or so for personal use. Coriolanus's grandmother had laughed. How ghastly. No, my dear. Ghastly is what happens without them, Pluribus said. He didn't elaborate, but Grandmam stopped laughing. She shot a look at Coriolanus, her hand clenched for a second. She seemed involuntary, almost a spasm. She looked at the crates and appeared to be figuring something in her head. How many can you spare? She asked the club owner. Coriolanus pulled one crate home in his wagon. The other 29 arrived in the dead of night. As hoarding was technically illegal, Cyrus and his friends hauled the crate up the stairs and piled them in the middle of the lavishly furnished living room. On top of the piles they placed a single can of milk, compliments of Pluribus. They bid them good night. Coriolanus and Tigris helped Grandmam hide them in the closet, a fancy wardrobe even in the oldest clock. In closets, in fancy wardrobes, even in the old clock. Who's going to eat all these? He asked. At this time there was still bacon in his life, and chicken, and the occasional roast. Milk was spotty, but cheese plentiful. And some sort of dessert could be counted on at dinner, even if it was just jam bread. We'll eat some. Perhaps we can trade, said the Grandmam. That'll be our secret. I don't like lima beans, Coriolanus pouted. At least I don't think I do. Well, we'll have Cook find a good recipe, said Grandmam. But Cook had been called to serve in the war, but then died of the flu. The Grandmam, it turned out, did not even know how to turn on the stove, let alone follow a recipe. It fell to 8-year-old Tigris to boil beans into the thick stew, then the soup, then the watery broth. which was to sustain them throughout the war. Lima beans, cabbage, the ration of bread they lived on, day in, day out for years. Surely it had appended his growth. Surely he would be a bit taller, his shoulders broader, and he had more food, but his brain had developed properly. At least he hoped it had. Beans, cabbage, brown bread. Coriolanus grew to hate the stuff, but it kept them alive without shame, without cannibalizing dead bodies in the street. Coriolanus swallowed the saliva flooding to his mouth as he reached for the gilt-edged plate embossed with Academy seal. Even in the leanest days, the capital had not lacked fancy dishware. He had eaten many a cabbage leaf from the fine china at home. He collected a linen napkin, a fork and a knife, as he raised the lid of the first sterling silver chafed dish. The steam bathed his lips. Creamed onion. He took a modest spoonful, trying not to drool. Boiled potatoes, summer squash, baked ham, hot rolls, and a pat of butter. On second thought, 2 pats. The full plate, but not a greedy one, not for a teenage boy. He set his plate on the table next to Clemesia and went to retrieve his dessert from a cart. But because last year they had run out and missed the tapacoca entirely, his heart skipped a beat when he saw rows of apple pie wedges, each decorated with a paper flag sporting the seal of Panem. Pie! When he had last tasted that, he had reached for a medium-sized piece when someone thrust a plate with an enormous slice under his with an enormous slice under his nose. I'll take the big one. Grong boy like you can handle it. Dean Highbottom's eyes were roomy. I can't say that. Or enormous. I'll just say that because I'm pretty sure that's what it means. He hoped, but they had lost the glazed look of this morning. In fact, they were trained on Coriolanus with unexpected sharpness. He took the pie with a grin, as he hoped it was boyishly good nature. Thank you, sir. I always can find room for pie. Yes, pleasure. Never hard for accommodate, said Dean. No one would know better than I. I suppose not, sir, but that sounded wrong. He meant to agree with the part about pleasures. He should have, but it sounded like a snide remark about Dean's character. You suppose not? Dean Highbottom's eyes narrow, continued to stare at Coriolanus. So what are your plans, Coriolanus, for after the games? I hope to go to uni, he replied. University, he replied. What a strange question. Surely his academic record made that evident. Yes, I saw your name among the prize contenders, said Dean Highbottom. If you shouldn't be awarded one? Coriolanus stammered. Well, then we'd pay for the tuition, of course. Would you? Dean Highbottom laughed. Look at you, in your makeshift shirt, your too tight shoes, trying to hold it together, strutting around the capital, when I doubt the Snows had a pot to piss in. Even with a prize, it could not be a stretch. You don't even yet have one, do you? What then? I wonder you could. What happened to you? What then? Coriolanus could not have helped but glance around to see who else had heard the terrible words, but people were engaged in the mealtime chatter. Don't worry, nobody knows, or hardly anyone. Enjoy that pie, boy. Dean Highbottom walked away without bothering to take a piece himself. Coriolanus wanted nothing so much as a drop of his pie and run for the exit. But instead he carefully set the oversized slice back on the cart. The nickname it could only be that the nickname he had found its way back to Dean Highbottom, with Coriolanus giving the credit. It would have been stupid on his part. The Dean was too powerful of a person to be ridiculed in public, but was it really such a horrible thing? Every teacher had at least one nickname, much far less flattering. It wasn't as if High's Highbottom made such an effort to hide his habit. He seemed to invite derisation. Could it be some reason he hated Coriolanus so much? Whatever it was, Coriolanus needed to set it straight. He could not risk losing his prize over such a thing. After university, he planned to embark on some lucrative profession. Without an education, what doors would open to him? Tried to imagine him future in a low-level city position, doing what? Managing the coal distribution to the districts, filling cages of genetic freaks in the mutation labs, collecting touches from Sir Janus's plinth in his partial apartment on the Corso while lived in some rat hole 50 blocks out. That's if he was lucky. Capital jobs were hard to come by, and he could be penniless. He would be a penniless academy graduate. No more. How was he to live? Borrow. Being in debt in the capital was historically a ticket to being a peacekeeper, and that came with a 20-year commitment to who knew where. They'd ship him off to some horrid backwater district where the people were hardly better than animals. The day which he had held such promise came crashing down around him. First the threat of losing his apartment, then the lowliness of tributes assigned, who on further reflection was definitely craving, now a revelation that Dean Highbottom detested him enough to kill his prize chances and condemn him to life in the districts. Everyone knew what happened if you went to the districts. We were written off, forgotten. In the eyes of the capital, we were basically dead.